Hello, friends. How are we doing? Welcome. Another episode, a live. I do love doing YouTube lives. They feel a lot more fun. And I gotta be honest, too, they make these kinds of videos that we do a lot more enjoyable. Because sometimes when you're just recording with someone and there's no one to watch it with you, it's just a different feeling. So great to be with you. Welcome back. Today is going to be a very, I think, maybe one of the most educational lives that we've ever done, because full transparency, I am definitely out of my depth in many ways on this one, which is why I had to bring in someone who knew way more about this topic than I ever will. So I'm happy to introduce Father Jim Bretzke on the show with us today. Father Jim, great to have you. Thank you for making time.
My pleasure. Thank you very much.
Absolutely. I'm going to have you introduce yourself in 1 minute. But friends, if you're just joining, welcome. We are the New Evangelicals. We're a nonprofit organization that holds space for folks marginalized by the evangelical church. We help people navigate a better path forward in their faith, and we advocate for accountability inside of evangelical spaces. So that's what we do. And like I said, we're a nonprofit. This is what we do all day digitally, all kinds of content and community resources. So very briefly, before I have Father Jim introduce himself, and hi friends, I see all of you in the chat. Great to see you. Let me kind of give you the backstory. Obviously, I think the whole world saw a few clips from Harrison Butker's speech. It went viral online. People had a million opinions, including me. I had opinions too. And we talked about it on our podcast channels and our socials, because I did catch some of the language that in my context sounded very Christian Nationalist-y to me. And I track a lot of that. So to me, I saw some overlap. But as I was watching more of the speech, I said, there's a lot of language that Harrison is using that sounds like maybe they are directed more towards the Catholic Church or things that are happening in the Catholic world that I just have no context for. And frankly, as someone who is, maybe we can say, a cradle evangelical, I don't think I've been given the best knowledge or understanding of the Catholic tradition. So I decided to bring on Father Jim to help us unpack what was going on in Harrison's speech, maybe that the mainstream and mass media kind of missed. And I think that will hopefully help us not only have a better understanding of just the wide world of Catholicism in general, but also how maybe there are some similarities of things that we're doing and things that folks like Father Jim and others are doing. So, Father Jim, the floor is yours. Why don't you go ahead and introduce yourself briefly?
Okay, great. So my name is Father Jim Bretzke. I'm a Jesuit priest, and for those that don't know, Jesuits are a religious order. It was founded in 1540 by Ignatius of Loyola, a Spaniard. And in the United States, we run 27 colleges and universities, double that number of high schools, parishes, and other things like that. I am currently teaching theology at John Carroll University in suburban Cleveland. That's run by the Jesuits. I've been a Jesuit for 54 years. I've been a cradle Catholic for a bit longer than that. So a lot of the stuff that we're going to be hearing about that Harrison Butker is talking about, that's the church that I grew up in. So I know that from the inside out. I have had the good fortune, I think, of working around the world. I did my doctorate in Rome. I served as
Wow.
a missionary in Korea, where we have a university. I'm actually going to be going back there in August to teach for the fall semester. And then besides Korea and Rome, I've taught in Manila at our school of theology there. And in the United States, I taught at our two theology centers in Boston and Berkeley for a decade apiece, and also taught at the University of San Francisco and Marquette in my hometown of Milwaukee, Wisconsin, before coming to John Carroll in 2019.
Wow. Okay, so you just have some credentials, just a few. Can I ask you one kind of big picture question? I appreciate your hospitality, fielding my ignorance here. When I would just kind of was under the impression, and this is probably not the case, that Catholic is just a very univocal word for the Catholic Church, meaning, in the Protestant tradition, we have all these different denominations and evangelical, all these little subcultures. In Catholicism, is there like different branches of Catholicism, or is it all pretty unified under the Pope, if that's the right way of even phrasing the question? I'm not really sure.
Well, I think in the popular mindset, we're probably pretty unified. To go into the particulars is what we would probably call inside baseball. So there are
Okay.
there are the biggest group of Catholics would be Roman Catholics, and they are under the Pope, and we share a common liturgy, common uh, tradition, canon law and things like that. There are also sections of the church that are in union with the Pope, but not Roman Catholic. So Coptic Christians, Byzantine, things like that. But that's the inside baseball part.
Got it. That's helpful. Really quick, I want to bring up this comment here. Madison says, as a former Catholic, I am so stoked for this. Also, new fan here, excited for my first live. Madison, thank you for being here. It means a lot. I'm also excited because I just feel like there's so much to learn. Is there anything, Father Jim, that you want to say as we kind of tee up this video that we're going to go through about the speech or just any caveats that you want to give before we get started?
Well, he does use a fair amount of Catholic language that would be understood by probably most Catholics. I do want to say, though, just because when we hear it, it will be helpful maybe to have had it flagged ahead of time so we say, oh, that's what this means. So he is bringing up consistently towards the last half of his speech what he calls the TLM, which is shorthand for Traditional Latin Mass. Now that was the Mass that I grew up with in the church. That was the Mass that was in Latin, one basic form, and it was that like that for several centuries. But then it was revised in the Second Vatican Council, which was from 1962 to 1965 when I was in grade school, not high school. I'm old, but not that old.
Fair.
That was what I grew up with. So he's going to be talking about that, and it is a little bit like the goal in his view, the golden age. So we should get back to that. So it's helpful that when he talks about the TLM, that's what he's talking about, and that liturgy has been sharply constrained since the Second Vatican Council closed in 1965, and Pope Francis has said that it can't be any priest anywhere doing it only with the permission of the local bishop, and even then it should be only in one or two places in a diocese. So he's reacting very strongly against that, and if you know that ahead of time, that will make that part of his speech a little more understandable.
Yeah, a little insider baseball for us. That is helpful to understand. Okay. Yeah, and as we go through, I might ask you for some more details about the Vatican II, what it represents, and things like that. Last question I have for you, then we'll get started. What can you tell us about Benedictine College? My understanding is that it is a Catholic school, a Catholic college. Anything else that we should know ahead of time about the school?
Okay, well, in the Catholic Church, there are a number of religious orders of men and women that have been. These are people that aren't getting married, and they usually have a mission or something like that. Like the Jesuits, we have these 27 colleges. Benedictine was founded by a group of Benedictine sisters, nuns, and it's a small liberal arts college in Atchison, Kansas. So it's a small place in, I think you would say, kind of rural America. And in the last several years, they have kind of rebranded themselves to be appealing to these culturally conservative Catholics. And so they've had a fair amount of success in that, but it is, I suppose, from a marketing perspective, you would say it's a bit of a niche market.
Got it. Okay, that's helpful. All right, friends, we're going to get started here in just 1 second. Really quick, just want to say briefly, if you could like this video, if you could subscribe to our channel if you're enjoying it so far, that would be great. And without further ado, let's start going through this speech by Harrison Butker with Father Jim. And Father Jim, I already told you the rule. You can interrupt me whenever you need to as we unpack this together. So here we go, friends. Buckle up, get the popcorn. This is not coffee, okay? I know. It should be blueberry coffee, but I already had 2 cups today. This is just straight up seltzer, so I don't want to lie. It's not coffee. Here we go.
Ladies and gentlemen of the class of 2024, I would like to start off by congratulating all of you for successfully making it to this achievement today. I'm sure your high school graduation was not what you had imagined, and most likely, neither was your first couple years of college. By making it to this moment through all the adversity thrown your way from COVID, I hope you learned the important lessons that suffering in this life is only temporary. As a group, you witnessed firsthand how bad leaders who don't stay in their lane can have a negative impact on society.
Okay, I have a question.
Could we stop there for a second?
Perfect. Great. I love it. Great minds.
Okay,
Go ahead.
so stay in your lane is a leitmotif. It's like a returning refrain that he will be coming back to throughout the talk, and I'm not quite sure what he means by it, nor am I sure what he how he understands it, because he's a place kicker for the Kansas City Chiefs. That doesn't seem to be in his lane. And the second thing is he's got a lot of very lightly coded cultural critiques.
Yes.
COVID was stressful for everyone. Certainly, I mean, I've taught online for a year or something, so it's stressful for everyone. But
Yeah.
he seems to presume that COVID was poorly handled, almost by intention. And what he also seems to overlook is COVID came out in early 2020, and the president of the United States at that time was Donald Trump.
Hmm.
And then we had the vaccine and everything else, and the public mask mandates and everything else. All of the initial part of that was during the presidency of Donald Trump. But he seems to be telegraphing that COVID and everything that's negative that comes out of that probably should be laid at the doorstep of the current president. And I think that's historically inaccurate and problematic.
Yeah, I totally agree, 100%. And to Christian's point, which, by the way, Christian, thank you for the super chat, friends. All super chats go right to the organization to fund this work. I can tell already Father Jim is going to be an amazing guest. I'm with you. I almost feel like this would be like me being like, hey, everyone, we all need to stay in our lane. And then me doing this live by myself, trying to, answer these questions about Harrison Butker's, language here when it comes to Catholicism. Being like, no, I can answer that. I feel like that's kind of what's happening here with Harrison, where it's like, hey, man, I'm not going to doubt your talent on the football field. Like, that's an amazing achievement. But if you're going to claim to stay in your lane, perhaps you should just, I don't know, practice what you preach. I'm no expert in the field. One question I wanted to ask you, when he says bad leaders, do you think he's referring mostly to political leaders, or is there something in the Catholic universe as well with like a schism between the, mask mandates and all that kind of stuff that he could be hinting at in your estimation?
Well, I think the basic framework he's working out of is broad cultural critique.
Yeah,
So he
right.
doesn't like the contemporary culture. He doesn't like the leaders in the contemporary culture. Many conservative Catholics are particularly critical of our current Pope, Pope Francis, who became Pope in 2013. Pope Francis did two things that Harrison probably three things that Harrison probably doesn't like. So he constrained the traditional Latin Mass. He hasn't gotten into that yet in the part we've heard, but it's coming. Pope Francis also underscored the importance of making sure we follow best practices, public health things in terms of mask mandates and everything else. And then the last thing, and this particularly irritates some people, is he told people to get the vaccine, to take it, that it was a moral obligation. And the people off kind of on the right fringe find those three unforgivable sins.
Got it. Okay, that's helpful. All right, we're 33 seconds in. Here we go.
It is through this lens that I want to take stock of how we got to where we are and where we want to go as citizens and, yes, as Catholics. One last thing before I begin. I want to be sure to thank President Minnis and the board for their invitation to speak. When President Minnis first reached out a couple of months ago, I had originally said no. You see, last year I gave the commencement address at my alma mater, Georgia Tech, and I felt that one graduation speech was more than enough, especially for someone who isn't a professional speaker. But of course, President Minnis used his gift of persuasion and spoke to the many challenges you all faced throughout the COVID fiasco and how you missed out on so many milestones the rest of us older people have taken for granted. While COVID might have played a large role throughout your formative years, it is not unique. Bad policies and poor leadership have negatively impacted major life issues. Things like abortion, IVF, surrogacy, euthanasia, as well as a growing support for degenerate cultural values in media, all stem from the pervasiveness of disorder. Our own nation is led by a man who publicly and proudly proclaims his Catholic faith, but at the same time is delusional enough to make the sign of the cross during a pro-abortion rally.
Let's pause there for a second. He said a lot, and I don't want to presume things that I might not or not know. So what are your thoughts on what he's saying regarding some of these comments and kind of aiming them at Biden regarding his stance on abortion, et cetera?
Well, I think the thing about a Biden that would be helpful to articulate is Biden is not pro-abortion. Pro-abortion would be someone that feels, well, the more abortions we have, the better. It'd be
Right.
like pro-growth. The more growth we have, the better. What Biden is pro-choice. And what that means is that he believes that on these healthcare decisions that revolve around pregnancy, it should be the persons or persons closest to it that make those decisions. And those would be the women, their healthcare givers, their family, etc. So he's saying this is where the decision should be made. They shouldn't be made farther up. And I just came back from giving a paper at a conference where we were looking at some of these so-called trigger laws in Catholic, not in Catholic circles, but in state legislatures,
Yes,
where
yes.
they make it very hard to get best care for women in non-viable pregnancies, things that are going to end in miscarriage or something else like that, because the laws were too broadly written. They weren't
Right.
clearly written. And so you have a lot of really bad laws out there. And the pro-choice position would be, and that would be like exhibit A for why we should be pro-choice. Now, I'm not coming down one way or the other saying this is where I stand, but that is where I think Biden stands. And the other thing that I would say is he is a cradle Catholic. He's older than I am, but I know the culture he grew up in, because it's the culture I grew up in. And so in a certain sense, when you make the sign of the cross like that, it's something of an automatic or semi-automatic reaction. So it was something about these efforts to further restrain access to abortion. If he had it to do over again, would he do it? I don't think so.
Right.
I think
Right.
I think that's
Fair.
why I say it's an automatic reaction. Like I lived in Italy and I did my doctorate there and taught there, and you'd say automatically something like, "Oh, mio Dio," which literally means "my God," but it doesn't. You stub your toe and you'd say "mio Dio" or something like that. You don't say, "Oh my God, I am taking God's name in vain." It's just
Right.
it's automatic. So just imagine
Totally.
if you stub your toe or hit your finger with a hammer, you might be taking the Lord's name not in prayer, but it's
Right.
automatic. It's not considered.
That makes sense. So I guess what I'm hearing you say is that when it comes to this topic of abortion and how we handle it, in the Catholic tradition, there is certainly room for debate on the best approach to minimize the amount of abortions. Is that kind of a fair statement?
Oh, yeah, that's certainly true. Then also in the Catholic position, and again, this gets to be maybe a little more inside baseball. When you have these non-viable or highly problematic medical pregnancies, there is an established set of reflection on what can you do, what can you not do in this. So that the easiest one, the one that I use all the time when I teach, is the so-called ectopic or tubal pregnancy.
Yeah.
So that's when the fetus, the egg gets fertilized in the fallopian tube. This is news to many men, but it's nevertheless true.
Unfortunately, it is, but you're right. Yes, keep going.
and so it's fertilized in the fallopian tube, and if everything went well, it would descend into the uterus, be implanted, and then 9 months later, you have the baby. But in an ectopic pregnancy, it attaches inside the wall of the fallopian tube. Now, in those cases, there is statistically a 0 chance for live birth. And so then the question becomes, well, what can you do? Because if you don't do anything
Yeah.
and it does not spontaneously abort, well, then it can kill the mother.
Yes.
And so
It's very dangerous, very quick.
Yeah, Catholic reflection would say, well, in a case like this, you certainly can terminate the pregnancy. But this is a sort of where staying in your lane would have been helpful for Harrison. Because I'm pretty sure he is largely unaware of that. And then later on, as we're going to hear him talk about some of these issues, he is taking a position that is not, in fact, endorsed by the Catholic Church, like on natural
Okay.
family planning. So that's
Okay, cool.
probably enough for now.
One last question I have to ask. I'm sorry. I know that I'm asking you a lot, but it's so important. He used the word IVF. Now, in my circles, when I heard him say that, I go, "Oh, this is a newer position that I've heard more far right evangelical Christians who are pro-life hold, like Ali Stuckey and others who are really now going after the process of IVF." Again, when you hear Harrison mentioned IVF. Is there like Catholic teaching on that? Is there a kind of a consensus on this, or what do you hear when you heard him say that word?
Well, IVF, again, I teach college and I have learned to take nothing for granted. So let's make sure we know what IVF stands for.
Good
IVF
point.
is an acronym that stands for in vitro fertilization. So it's an
Yeah.
assisted reproductive technology, and it deals with couples that cannot seem to get pregnant in a normal way. So eggs are extracted from the woman's ovaries, fertilized in a test tube with the man's sperm, and then the small embryos, usually 8 cells, are then put into the woman's uterus to try to be implanted. This started in 1978. This medical process with a British woman who's now middle aged or more, by the name of Louise Brown. This has been condemned by the Catholic Church
Okay.
because it separates what they call the conjugal act. The procreative dimension from the love dimension. Why did he bring it up? Well, because in this past year, the Alabama Supreme Court
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
ruled on the accidental destruction of some IVF embryos that were in storage, and they conferred on them legally personhood.
Right.
And so this now we're off and running on that issue. From the Catholic perspective, this is not new news. I mean, in the sense of what is the Catholic position? It's just that this is now, an issue that the very strong quote unquote pro-lifers would say we can't allow IVF, and
Right.
where others say, well, wait a minute here, because this is this isn't so politically. This is controversial, and this is going to take some of our political base away from them if we try to outlaw IVF. But he's carving out a position here that puts him to the extreme right end of the Catholic Church, and I would say politically in the Republican Party as well.
Okay. That's really helpful. I really appreciate you giving us that information. All right, friends. Hey, hope you're enjoying this. I hope you're taking notes out there. This is good stuff. This is good stuff. Here we go.
He has been so vocal in his support for the murder of innocent babies that I'm sure to many people, it appears that you can be both Catholic and pro-choice. He is not alone. From the man behind the COVID lockdowns to the people pushing dangerous gender ideologies onto the youth of America, they all have a glaring thing in common. They are Catholic. This is an important reminder that being Catholic alone doesn't cut it. These are the sorts of things we are told in polite society to not bring up. The difficult and unpleasant things. But if we are going to be men and women for this time in history, we need to stop pretending that the Church of Nice is a winning proposition. We must always speak and act in charity, but never mistake charity for cowardice. It is safe to say that over the past few years, I've gained quite the reputation for speaking my mind. I never envisioned myself nor wanted to have this sort of a platform, but God has given it to me, so I have no other choice but to embrace it and preach more hard truths about accepting your lane and staying in it.
Can we stop there for just a sec? Okay, so 3 points. He talks about we should always practice charity. I'm not sure how he personally understands charity, because I think a lot of those remarks would not be good charitable expressions. The second thing is that he talked about, well, he doesn't want to be, to have the notoriety of a public speaker. I'm thinking of a line from Shakespeare: "Methinks the lady doth protest too much." I think I think he very much enjoys the
Yeah.
notoriety that he's gaining. And the third thing is, and probably the most problematic is, he is claiming God
Yeah.
has given him this role. This is where we would talk about in the Catholic tradition discernment of spirits. You want to make sure that the spirit that is moving you in genuinely is the spirit of God, and
Hmm.
not the evil spirit masquerading as an angel of light. And that's hard for all of us. But I
Sure.
get very uneasy when anyone tells me, either like he is publicly or privately, if we were having a pastoral conversation, God has told me to do X,
Hmm.
because the voice of God can too easily, like in the era of ChatGPT and AI, we can
Uh-huh.
have a lot of AI for the voice of God.
Yes, yes, that's great. There are a lot of us in the evangelical space who would agree with you, because we've had too many people tell us, "Oh, God told me to tell you A, B, C, D, or E." And I one time I had someone, God bless her, she said, "God told me we're going to get married." I was like, "What? I don't know if God told me that." So there's definitely overlap there. That's really helpful. All right, we'll keep it going. This is really great.
As members of the church founded by Jesus Christ, it is our duty and ultimately privilege to be authentically and unapologetically Catholic. Don't be mistaken, even within the church, people in polite Catholic circles will try to persuade you to remain silent. There even was an award-winning film called Silence, made by a fellow Catholic, wherein one of the main characters, a Jesuit priest, abandoned the church and as an apostate, when he died, is seen grasping a crucifix, quiet and unknown to anyone but God.
Can we stop right there?
Of course.
Uh, Silence is a novel that was published by a Japanese Catholic, Shusaku Endo, in 1966. I am writing a book on this novel.
What great
I
timing. What a coincidence.
Yeah. So, I mean, I've read it countless times. I've seen the movie countless times. I have a hunch he has not read the book, and I'm not even sure he's seen the movie. He's going to reference in just a second Bishop Robert Barron, who is a very kind of like a televangelist Catholic, who
Okay.
has condemned the movie because it's a very complex issue here. The man, the Sebastian Rodriguez, the protagonist of the novel, ultimately does make a distinction between his belief in God and his belief in the church. And he hears God telling him to apostatize to save these Christians, but he believes it's the voice of God.
Hmm.
And it cost him a lot. It cost him his place in the church. So the novel is much more complex than Harrison is giving it credit for, and I think it's a really problematic misreading of the whole plot.
Noted. I also noticed that, and maybe this is I'm too sensitive to this, but he keeps on saying polite society or polite church culture, something like that. Is that something to you? Because I've never really heard things phrased like that before. Is that a Catholic term, or just the way he talks? I mean, I really can't tell.
Well, I hope it's not a Catholic term. I mean, I'm all for being polite. I think when he's using it as a little bit of a sword, so that it's a way of it's a polite way of denouncing your opponent. You say, well,
Yeah. Yeah.
did Hitler annoy the Jews? Well, that's maybe a polite way of saying it, but when we should be saying Hitler was guilty of dreadful genocide. So I think that it's a
Yeah.
cultural code on his part, but no, that's not a Catholic term.
Yeah, someone in the comments says it's a trad term. I think from like the whole trad movement, and that definitely could be correct.
Okay.
I mean, there is. I will say there is an overlap here of some of the more far right evangelicals I follow have the same kind of idea about we have to stop being so nice. Niceness is a problem. One person even says he's a evangelical leader. Empathy is a sin. I'm not kidding. And so there is like this movement towards we have to be more militant, more emphatic, more brash about what we believe and why people have to assimilate inside of it. So I hear some overlap in my own language and in my own culture with how Harrison's been talking about that.
I wonder how they would deal with John chapter 8. Now, since you're a Protestant, you probably know what John chapter 8 is about. It's Jesus and the woman caught in adultery. That seems
Very familiar with that story.
to use that vocabulary, it seems Jesus is guilty of the sin of empathy, and he does not condemn the woman. So that's always going to be a tough one to deal with.
You're not, you're preaching to the choir on that one, Father Jim. I'm with you all the way. All right, here we go.
Friend of Benedictine College, His Excellency Bishop Robert Barron, said in his review of the film, "It was exactly what the cultural elite want to see in Christianity: private, hidden away, and harmless. Our Catholic faith has always been countercultural. Our Lord, along with countless followers, were all put to death for their adherence to her teachings. The world around us says that we should keep our beliefs to ourselves whenever they go against the tyranny of diversity, equity, and inclusion. We fear speaking truth."
DEI term. Now that's a very that's a right-wing talking point through and through. This is Charlie Kirk. This is Ben Shapiro. So when he said that, I thought someone must be a fan of Charlie Kirk then, because this is like the newest whatever the word is, like, just scare tactic. First it was CRT, then it was the groomer language, now it's DEI. And so when he said DEI, or diversity, equity, and inclusion, I thought, oh, my alarm bells are going off here.
And if you look at diversity, equity, and inclusion, if you look at it, if you try to say disengage from the cultural wars, diversity is a fact.
Right.
I mean, it is a fact. It's a fact in our country, in our world. So it's a fact. So to say I'm against diversity, you say, well, welcome to the Flat Earth Society.
Right.
Sign you right up.
Right.
Equity is a basic social principle that the Catholic Church certainly respects, and equity is distinguished from equality. So the example that I use in classes, there's 3 boys that are watching a baseball game, and they're outside the fence, and this is a common meme. So, and they all have a wooden box.
Yep.
The tall boy is on a wooden box, and he can see over very well. The medium-sized boy has a wooden box, and he can see over the fence. The small boy has a wooden box. He can't see over the fence. That's egalitarianism. Everyone has one box. But equity would be, we want to make sure that everyone can see. And so the second frame is, you took the box from the tall boy that doesn't eat it anyway and gave it to the small boy. Now he has 2 boxes and he can see.
Here, right here.
Yeah, that's it. So that's the notion of equity, and that is no one should be against equity. It's a basic position. And then inclusion is simply the strategy to get to keeping the diversity in equity. And again, that's where the rubber hits the road and leaves tire marks, because a lot of people say, well, wait a minute here. You're going to take away my box and give it to someone else? I don't want to, inclusion, that's going too far.
Right. Dan in the chat says it well. The movie Silence is not about telling Catholics to sit down and shut up and submit to DEI. Like, yes, exactly. That's not what it's about. So, all right, great point. Let's keep going. This is fantastic. Thank you again, Father Jim, for making time. You've been so helpful already.
Truth, because now, unfortunately, truth is in the minority. Congress just passed a bill where stating something as basic as the biblical teaching of who killed Jesus could land you in jail.
This isn't true.
But make no mistake, before we even attempt to fix any of the issues plaguing society, we must first get our own house in order, and it starts with our leaders. The bishops and priests appointed by God as our spiritual fathers must be rightly ordered. There's not enough time today for me to list all the stories of priests and bishops misleading their flocks, but none of us can blame ignorance anymore and just blindly proclaim that that's what Father said. Because sadly, many priests we are looking to for leadership are the same ones who prioritize their hobbies or even photos with their dogs and matching outfits for the parish directory.
Can we
It's
stop
easy
there
for us.
a second?
Yeah, I heard a lot there. I need someone to decode it for me.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm on social media. I'm on Facebook. I'm on Twitter, X, etc. Are there priests that do these things? Yeah. Does it take them away from the parish? I don't think so. He really is painting with a very broad brush, and it's only got one color palette, and that's black.
Yeah.
So he's really he's this is in terms of logic, this is a false generalization. So you would say, well, so and so did that, and so is a priest, therefore all priests are like that. That's a false generalization. It's an illogical argument. But he does this over and over again in his own approach to things. And I think it's just very problematic from a point of view of honesty.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense. Also, again, I go back to the beginning of his speech, staying in your lane, and I don't want to make ignorant claims here, but I don't think Harrison is like a leader in the Catholic Church, and it's just interesting watching him really critique things that maybe he just doesn't really actually fully understand, while he does it from a platform, 1,000 miles away. So, and again, this happens in evangelicalism all the time. This is not a unique thing. It's just interesting to see it here and be like, interesting observations. Like, on what authority can you make these claims, and on what authority are they substantiated, and therefore should be enforced?
Mm-hmm.
So, all right, we'll keep it going.
Laymen and women to think that in order for us to be holy, that we must be active in our parish and try to fix it. Yes, we absolutely should be involved in supporting our parishes, but we cannot be the source for our parish priests to lean on to help with their problems. Just as we look at the relationship between a father and his son, so too should we look at the relationship between a priest and his people. It would not be appropriate for me to always be looking to my son for help when it is my job as his father to lead him.
All right, we'll pause.
He's 28. I don't know how old his kids are, but when the kids get to be high school, I'd like to check back with him. And you just think of that old phrase from Mark Twain, that when he was 14, he thought his father was a damn fool. And when he was 21, he was amazed at how much the man had learned in 7 short years. This is the importance of experience. At the end of the day, Harrison is 28, and he has the experience of a 28-year-old, and that is substantial, but it's not comprehensive. And I think that's part of his problem. He doesn't recognize his own kind of context and limitations.
Yeah, I agree.
Maria Scriva states that priests are ordained to serve and should not yield to temptation to imitate lay people, but to be priests through and through. Tragically, so many priests revolve much of their happiness from the adulation they receive from their parishioners, and in searching for this, they let their guard down and become overly familiar. This undue familiarity will prove to be problematic every time, because as my teammate's girlfriend says, familiarity breeds contempt.
Is he saying, what I hear him saying, again, I just don't know, is that, hey, priests and parishioners should not be so close because it's unhealthy for the priest? What is he talking about here? Like, what is he alluding to?
Well, to be honest, I'm not entirely sure.
Okay, fair.
So I presume that he has some experiences, or he's heard experiences that he's referencing here. I don't know what they are. You cannot run a parish today. I mean, I teach at John Carroll, our college, but right next to it, across the parking lot, is a large parish that we run. And so I live with the 3 people who are on the staff, and I hear on a daily basis what it means to run the parish. You can't do it all by yourself, even if you wanted to. And that certainly shouldn't be the way the Christian life is right. Conceived. And so to have people involved is a great thing. And priests need kind of a sense of community. And so I just think he's barking up the wrong tree here. And it really is a problem.
No, I agree. And yes, that was a Taylor Swift reference, everyone, which only makes the future comments coming out of his mouth all the more ironic. So you're absolutely correct. You heard that correctly. All right, we'll keep it going. Thanks again for the input on that.
St. Jose Maria continues that some want to see the priest as just another man. That is not so. They want to find in the priest those virtues proper to every Christian and indeed every honorable man, understanding, justice, a life of work, priestly work in this instance, and good manners. It is not prudent as the laity for us to consume ourselves in becoming amateur theologians so that we can decipher this or that theological teaching, unless, of course, you are a theology major.
Okay, could we stop right there? Because he's doing just what he said we shouldn't be doing.
Yeah.
You know, he's a football player. I know what football is, but you wouldn't want me as the coach of any team. But he doesn't. His sense of entitlement is immense here. That somehow he believes he's got good values, and therefore that entitles him to
Yeah.
pass judgment on all sorts of things. And I think that is really problematic. If he had stayed in his lane, he might have picked up a little more theology.
I mean, to use a football term, he sounds like he's really playing Monday morning quarterback at this point, right? Where it's like, okay, yeah, anyone from the stands can look back the day after and say what you should have done, but like you just don't really know what it's like to be in there and be part of that world, right? So, yeah, I'm with you. Great.
We must be intentional with our focus on our state in life and our own vocation. And for most of us, that's as married men and women. Still, we have so many great resources at our fingertips that it doesn't take long to find traditional and timeless teachings that haven't been ambiguously reworded for our times. Plus, there are still many good and holy priests, and it's up to us to seek them out. The chaos of the world is unfortunately reflected in the chaos in our parishes, and sadly, in our cathedrals too. As we saw during the pandemic, too many bishops were not leaders at all. They were motivated by fear of being sued, fear of being removed, fear of being disliked. They showed by their actions, intentional or unintentional, that the sacraments don't actually matter. Because of this, countless people died alone without access to the sacraments, and it's a tragedy we must never forget.
Okay, what's going on there?
Well,
what's he referring to?
So my day job, besides teaching theology, is I teach moral theology, which is Christian ethics. This is a very good example of the sin of what we call rash judgment. So he's come out and he's judged all these bishops, etc., without, I think, paying attention to the deeper issues involved. So the bishops and the priests during the COVID, the height of the COVID pandemic, before we had the vaccine, they followed the public health mandates, which was to restrict the gathering so that you couldn't have 1,000 people in a church. We didn't know. I mean, many things that we now know about the COVID vaccine, we didn't know at the time. In our own house, we were rubbing down banisters with disinfectant.
Same.
Yeah,
Wiping stuff down. I get it.
Okay, so we recognize now that wasn't the primary way it was transmitted, and so the bishops were doing the best they could with the knowledge that they had available. I don't think that they were living in fear as he understands this. I'll give you an example from a Benedictine graduate that teaches at our institution. So the Bishop of Cleveland told all the churches first to close down, and then then he told them that people, when they come into the church, had to wear a mask. This wasn't a guideline. It wasn't a pious thought. It was a requirement that he says, if you come into the church, you have to be putting a mask on. And this person that I'm referring to refused to do that. She left the church that she was a member of. And then at a faculty meeting, when we were talking about vaccine mandates, she said, well, those of us that refuse to get them, you're quitting us. We're being made to put on yellow stars.
Wow.
Well, that was a fairly public statement. Again, I think she was sincere in her beliefs, but really not informed by charity and not informed by great prudence. And this is where you need a little more scientific knowledge and maybe just a little more tolerance.
Yes, I mean, yes to all of that. We were also wiping down surfaces. We were doing the best that we had with the information that we had. One final question follow-up. When he's talking about the sacraments, I'm assuming he's referring to Eucharist. And is his critique that churches or Catholic churches shut down and so folks were deprived of receiving the Eucharist? Is that what he's referring to there?
Well, it's not. We should have him on board with us too to ask him. I'm not sure if that's what he means, or what I think. What the way I heard it was, when someone is very sick and approaching death, there is a sacrament in the Catholic Church called the anointing of the sick, or the sacrament of the sick.
Okay.
During the time of COVID, it was very difficult because of the COVID regulations
Right.
for a priest to administer that. I think that's what he means.
That
but
makes
but
more
it's not,
sense.
but
Okay.
it's not clear. It's
Okay.
not absolutely clear.
Yeah, no, but that would make more sense to my hypothesis. So, okay, noted. Thank you.
As Catholics, we can look to so many examples of heroic shepherds who gave their lives for their people, and ultimately, the church. We cannot buy into the lie that the things we experienced during COVID were appropriate. Over the centuries, there have been great wars, great famines, and yes, even great diseases, all that came with a level of lethality and danger. But in each of those examples, church leaders leaned into their vocations and ensured that their people received the sacraments. Great saints like St. Damien of Malachi, who knew the dangers of his ministry, stayed for 11 years as a spiritual leader to the leper colonies of Hawaii. His heroism is looked at today as something set apart and unique, when ideally it should not be unique at all. For as a father loves his child, so a shepherd should love his spiritual children too. That goes even more so for our bishops, these men who are present-day apostles. Our bishops once had adoring crowds of people kissing their rings and taking in their every word, but now relegate themselves to a position of inconsequential existence.
I saw you smile there. Something come to your head?
Well, yeah, it's a little personal biography. My uncle was a bishop. I mean, he's dead now, gone to God. He ordained me a priest.
Okay,
But
wow.
but when I was a little kid, he would come to visit his older sister, who was my aunt in our same neighborhood, and the cousins. My cousins and I, we would all be taken over to my aunt's house to literally to kiss the bishop's ring. That was part of Catholic culture. Okay? So we would kneel down, and he'd hold out his hand, and we'd kiss it, and then so we thought, oh yeah, this is a great blessing. So yes, that was part of Catholic culture. But I think Harrison is, like many people that want to go back to some golden age. He's never lived through this era, and I don't think he knows what all it would involve if it were to return. I think it's much better the kind of bishops we have today. I remember, I mean, this will be maybe mildly off color, but there was a person, this wasn't my uncle, but there was a person who said, "I want to kiss your ring, Bishop," and he says, "It's in my back pocket." So,
Yeah.
what is it? To kiss the bishop's ring means that you recognize the bishop's authority as a leader of the church. This is one thing that Harrison is not doing in his speech. He is not recognizing the authority of the bishops to lead the church today. In short, he's not staying in his lane.
I see a recurring theme coming through this talk. Someone brought up in the comment, and I agree, that Butker opines for a past that maybe never even existed. And one of the reasons that I flagged this whole speech is because I thought, with Christian nationalism, it's the same mythological past that we're trying to get back to. Whether it's Make America Great Again or whatever else it could be, there seems to be this overlap in no matter if you're Catholic or evangelical, if you're in this more conservative right-wing world, you're looking to get back to this time. But the question, of course, is what time and whose rights were most privileged at that time, right? And so it's interesting because there is definitely a connection here between a lot of what Butker is talking about and how he's talking about it. with a lot of the folks that I watch and follow online who are also opining for this mythological past where things were just great and wonderful, and now we've lost it due to cultural decay and quote unquote gender ideology, just all very typical right-wing talking points. So it's very interesting to me to watch this happen in the context of someone who is part of the Catholic tradition as well. It's very insightful.
Now, when a bishop of a diocese or the bishops' conference as a whole puts out an important document on this matter or that, nobody even takes a moment to read it, let alone follow it. No. Today, our shepherds are far more concerned with keeping the doors open to the chancery than they are with saying the difficult stuff out loud. It seems that the only time you hear from your bishops is when it's time for the annual appeal, whereas we need our bishops to be vocal about the teachings of the church, setting aside their own personal comfort and embracing their cross. Our bishops are not politicians, but shepherds. So instead of fitting in the world by going along to get along, they too need to stay in their lane and lead. I say all of this not from a place of anger, as we get the leaders we deserve. But this does make me reflect on staying in my lane and focusing on my own vocation and how I can be a better father and husband and live in the world but not be of it. Focusing on my vocation while praying and fasting for these men will do more for the church than me complaining about her leaders. Because there seems to be so much confusion coming from our leaders, there needs to be concrete examples for people to look to in places like Benedictine, a little Kansas college built high on a bluff above the Missouri River, are showing the world how an ordered, Christ-centered existence is the recipe for success. You need to look no further than the examples all around this campus, where over the past 20 years, enrollment has doubled, construction and revitalization are a constant part of life, and people, the students, the faculty and staff, are thriving. This didn't happen by chance. In a deliberate movement to embrace traditional Catholic values, Benedictine has gone from just another liberal arts school with nothing to set it apart to a thriving beacon of light and a reminder to us all that when you embrace tradition, success, worldly and spiritual, will follow.
Okay, I have a question
at the
here.
AP.
It could be a very ignorant Protestant question, so forgive me. But he keeps on talking about being a traditional Catholic or going back to the tradition. Isn't the current typical Catholic Mass based on thousands of years of tradition already? Like, what else would he be referring to? I'm confused on that. Like, was there some big evolution in the modern Catholic Mass that I'm missing? So my understanding is that it's pretty consistent over time. Any idea what he's talking about here?
Well, I think his big thing is cultural critique, and he sees the world divided into light and darkness, right and wrong. In a certain sense, this is the heresy of Manichaeism, which was a big heresy during the time of St. Augustine, who was a 4th century, maybe the first big Catholic theologian. And it really is a bit simplistic because the world is mixed. It's Jesus talked about it in the parable of the wheat and the tares, which I suspect wheat and the weeds, sometimes people say. So I think that's Jesus is saying, this is the world, this is what we've got, and you need to be careful that you're not uprooting the good along with the bad. Now, in terms of the Catholic liturgy, Jesus at the Last Supper presumably was speaking Aramaic, and the ritual prayers were given in Hebrew, which would have been, the Passover prayers. The Catholic Church, from that point on, when it gathered together to celebrate the Passover, the Last Supper, they did it in the language of the time and the place. As time went on, the language of the Roman Empire was Latin. That was the common language from across the board, and so that became after time. So you went from Aramaic to Greek to Latin, and it stayed the language of the Church of the liturgy was in Latin until the Second Vatican Council, which concluded in 1965. And then what they did, the big change was the liturgy was going to be in the vernacular. So if, here in the United States, it would be in English. When I go to Korea, it's going to be in Korean. When I was in Italy, it was in Italian. And there's something that people find difficult with that. One thing is that it does make it maybe a little bit in their mind too accessible. Whereas if you did it in Latin, hoc est corpus meum, uh, which is this is the consecration prayer, which which this is my body is what I just said, but
Yeah.
it gets to be corrupt because you don't even understand it. So the word hocus pocus as a magical spell comes from that corruption of Latin.
Huh.
It went from hocus corpus meum to hocus pocus, and that's where the magic moment comes
Wow.
about.
Wow. Huh.
And so he's yearning for that.
Yeah.
It's not like an evil desire, but it's a simplistic desire. It's a simple desire. And I think, if he had done a little more cultural studies, he would be better at that, but he probably wouldn't have been as good a place kicker.
Yeah, no, totally fair. We actually have someone in the chat who grew up in what is called what he calls is the trad Catholic movement, and I had him decode this, but he says he grew up as a trad Catholic. He grew up FSSP, but I think Butker is SSPX, and the
Okay.
FSSP is an offshoot of the SSPX. Does that make sense to you?
Well, yes, but it needs to be decoded. So
Yes, please.
so the FSSP was an offshoot of the Second Vatican Council, a French bishop, who was a missionary in Africa by the name of Marcel Lefebvre. And he refused to accept the changes of Vatican II, and he started his own religious order where they had maintained the Mass in Latin. And then towards the end of his life in 1988, he consecrated some bishops so that his order would continue. Well, by consecrating a bishop without Roman approval, that is a violation. That puts you into excommunication, schismatic.
So it's pretty egregious. It's a pretty big no-no.
Yeah. And so
Got it.
the after the FSSP came, excuse me, he grew up FSSP. I've got my chronology somewhat backwards. So what Archbishop Lefebvre did was he founded this society called the Society of Saint Pius X. That's where you get to SSPX, but the X here means the Roman numeral 10. So Pius X was the Pope in the run up to World War I, and it was not in union with the Roman Catholic Church, and so after he died, they were trying to reach out to these people and bring them back, and so they created this FSSP, which is the Fraternal Society of Saint Peter. And Peter, of course, was the first pope. So that is it's under the Pope, and but they allowed the Pope allowed them to have what they call the Tridentine Mass, the pre-Vatican II Mass,
Yes.
Latin, and the rest of it. So it would be it's within the Catholic Church, but it would be often in this kind of little niche.
Yeah.
And Butker, I think Butker probably is. I think this man's understanding is correct. He probably is not within union with the Catholic Church, but is part of the Lefebvre group.
That makes sense because he also says here that he grew up, this is the commenter that we're talking with, Kevin here. I grew up attending a TLM, traditional Latin Mass. We refer to normal Catholic Masses as Novus Ordo, Latin for new
Correct.
order. So, okay. This is really helpful context, frankly.
Yeah, and so the Novus Ordo, it's correct. The Latin means new order. What it means is it's the vernacular language Mass.
Gotcha.
And so the TLM Catholics look on that as it's almost like a swear word.
Right.
That's Novus Ordo.
Okay, I mean, again, this is my mind. Folks, are you okay out there? I know we're giving you so much, especially if you didn't grow up in the Catholic world like I did. But man, this is so helpful and so fascinating. So again, thank you for being here and watching this live. If you're listening to this on podcast, thank you for listening. You can also watch this on YouTube. And don't worry, this live will get posted to YouTube right away. So if you have to sign off and come back to it later, it's not going anywhere. This is really helpful stuff. I appreciate it. We got about 10 minutes left of his speech. Let's keep going because there's still more to get to.
could not have imagined that their attempt to rebuke and embarrass places and people like those here at Benedictine wouldn't be met with anger, but instead met with excitement and pride. Not the deadly sin sort of pride that has an entire month dedicated to it.
Oh, Harrison, why you gotta shoot? Why you gotta take a shot at my queer friends, bro? Now, for me, as a more progressive evangelical, I was like, okay, that's rude, first off. But also, again, that just reeks of typical right-wing kind of mantra. I mean, a lot of the world I follow, the evangelical Christian nationalist world, they used Pride Month as a way to say, well, pride's a sin, which ironically, if I may for a second, it's funny how some of them respond by saying the only Pride Month I celebrate is, and it's a picture of the American flag. So just an interesting observation, but that bothers me. But Harrison, happy Pride Month to you. So all right, we'll keep it going.
True God-centered pride that is cooperating with the Holy Ghost to glorify him. Reading that article now shared all over the world.
Holy Ghost, again, is a coded term. That was the pre-Vatican II term for the third person of Blessed Trinity. Since that time, since 1965, we in English use the term Holy Spirit. So he's intentionally putting out there Holy Ghost. That's a code to his co-believers. I'm anti-Vatican II, and I'm not going to make any concessions to change of the way it was back in the 1600s.
Wow. Little things I would never pick up on. That is just, it's a little wink, wink, nod. Okay, interesting.
We see that in the complete surrender of self and a turning towards Christ, you will find happiness. Right here in a little town in Kansas, we find many inspiring lay people using their talents. President Minnis, Dr. Swafford, and Dr. Zimmerer are a few great examples right here on this very campus that will keep the light of Christ burning bright for generations to come. Being locked in with your vocation and staying in your lane is going to be the surest way for you to find true happiness and peace in this life.
Oh boy.
It is essential that we focus on our own state in life, whether that be as a layperson, a priest, or religious. Ladies and gentlemen of the class of 2024, you are sitting at the edge of the rest of your lives. Each of you has the potential to leave a legacy that transcends yourselves and this era of human existence. In the small ways, by living out your vocation, you will ensure that God's church continues and the world is enlightened by your example. For the ladies present today, congratulations on an amazing accomplishment.
Oh, thank you.
You should be proud of all that you have achieved to this point in your young lives. I want to speak directly to you briefly because I think it is you, the women, who have had the most diabolical lies told to you. How many of you are sitting here now about to cross this stage and are thinking about all the promotions and titles you are going to get in your career? Some of you may go on to lead successful careers in the world, but I would venture to guess that the majority of you are most excited about your marriage and the children you will bring into this world. I can tell you that my beautiful wife, Isabel, would be the first to say that her life truly started when she began living her vocation as a wife and as a mother. I'm on this stage today and able to be the man I am because I have a wife who leans into her vocation. I'm beyond blessed with the many talents God has given me, but it cannot be overstated that all of my success is made possible because a girl I met in band class back in middle school would convert to the faith, become my wife, and embrace one of the most important titles of all, homemaker.
Okay, I want to pause here for a second because if someone gave me this clip with no context, I didn't know what Benedictine College was, me and my audience would say, oh, this guy is an evangelical fundamentalist, because this whole diatribe that he just talked about, many people, and I will tell you, Father Jim, that most people listening to this, especially the women out there who follow our work, they grew up in a worldview that said your greatest achievement, your purpose in life is to become someone's husband and give them babies. That's ultimately what they were told. And so that's part of why, at least in my circles and beyond, this clip went so viral, because I think for a lot of people, it hit a chord of like, wait a second, I was taught this my whole life. And for a lot of people, especially women, it really messed them up. I mean, a lot of our work helps people navigate a better path forward. And a lot of the part of that story of hurt is them getting married at age 20 to someone that they really didn't know, that became abusive later on, etc. And then their church leader said, well, sorry, you have to stay with that person because it's God's will. So I think as I want to hear your thoughts on kind of how you hear this coming from your perspective as a Catholic and someone who teaches this stuff. But as someone who grew up in evangelical fundamentalism, I heard things like names of people like Bill Gothard, for example, who's very well known in our spaces, who kind of developed this very patriarchal, the husband's the head over his wife and the kids kind of vibe, and that a woman's highest goal in life is to just become a homemaker and make babies. So that's why for us it was such a, wait a second, Harrison, like this sounds too familiar. But I'm curious for you, when you hear this, in light of broadly speaking Catholic teaching or perspective, how you interpret some of this stuff.
Well, one thing that Catholic teaching, traditional Catholic teaching, would put out there that might be a little bit of a context for his view is when I was a kid, the common belief was the highest vocation for a man or a woman was not a husband or a wife or a father or a mother. The highest vocation would be to be a religious, to be a priest, a religious brother, or a religious sister, a religious woman. So if you wanted to talk about the highest vocation in traditional culture, it would have been to be a nun. And the default culture then, I suppose, would be to be a wife. Now, in my own personal background, my mother went to Marquette University and she got a degree in accounting. She was an accountant. My father was a business an efficiency expert, and he died, unfortunately, of childhood diabetes at the age of 32. So my mother, well, yeah, so I was 5. My mother then went back into the workforce. She was a trained accountant, so she had a a good job, good skill set, but she had been trained that way. So I grew up as a in traditional Catholic culture, but as a boy who saw the proper role of women vis-a-vis my mother as the head of the household, the breadwinner, the driver of the car, the fixer of everything. Right. So my view of motherhood is a little bit different than Harrison's, and
sure.
and I think here is, like, go back to your point, he is melding his view of the proper place of women onto a more conservative cultural view that probably is more affiliated with evangelical Protestantism.
Yeah, it's almost word for word at times. I mean, I'm telling you, if you just gave me this clip a month ago, not knowing any of this context, I would have assumed right away that this dude is someone who follows maybe, I'll throw some names that you might not know, but people like Doug Wilson or John MacArthur. It's very classic. And one of our critiques of that is that, honestly, and this might not be Harrison's way that he would get there, but in our tradition, it comes from the clear teaching of the Bible. The Bible's clear on these issues. But a lot of us, especially as we listen to other voices and historians and scholars, we're like, I think this is actually more of a American cultural framework that has been somehow distorted and people have made these arguments from the Bible, when in reality it's actually more from culture than it is from the Bible. So anyway, that's kind of a little ramble there. But yeah, I definitely agree with you. This, to me, was maybe the most evangelical part of the speech to my ears, where I said, wait, that sounds familiar. And friends, if you're curious, we did do a deep dive on this section in a previous podcast episode with April LaJoy about 2 weeks ago. So if you want to hear me and April really unpack that, you can do that on that episode. I want to keep moving, so we really continue to point out some of the maybe the language that Harrison's using that maybe to us Protestants it just goes over our heads. So let's keep it going.
She's a primary educator to our children. She's the one who ensures I never let football or my business become a distraction from that of a husband and father. She's the person that knows me best at my core, and it is through our marriage that, Lord willing, we will both attain salvation. I say all of this to you because
what does that mean, Lord willing, attain salvation? And any idea?
Well, in the Catholic traditional Catholic understanding of the sacrament of marriage. So the Catholics practice seven or hold seven sacraments. Marriage is the only one that doesn't require an outside minister of the church, because in the Catholic view, it is the husband and the wife that marry each other. That they are the ones that create or bestow the sacrament, and the belief is that gives the grace for the couple to grow in holiness, and in that sense, if you want to say, achieve salvation. So he actually is, I don't know if he realizes, he's really very mainstream Catholic in his view of the sacrament of marriage there.
Okay. That's very helpful. Thank you.
At firsthand, how much happier someone can be when they disregard the outside noise and move closer and closer to God's will in their life. Isabel's dream of having a career might not have come true, but if you asked her today if she has any regrets on her decision, she would laugh out loud without hesitation and say, heck no. As a man who gets a lot of praise and has been given a platform to speak to audiences like this one today, I pray that I always use my voice for God and not for myself. Everything I am saying to you is not from a place of wisdom, but rather a place of experience.
I'm sorry. I mean, maybe we have a policy here of non-dehumanization, so we're not here to make fun of Harrison or dehumanize him. But I think it might be wise for him to reconsider those words, because I think he has neither the wisdom nor the experience. And I'm 7 years ahead of him. I'm 35. I would be hesitant to say I have some kind of experience when I'm talking about things that I just am not a part of. So I think that is a moment worth noting. I think it is neither instead of one or the other in this case.
I'm hopeful that these words will be seen as those from a man not much older than you, who feels it is imperative that this class, this generation, and this time in our society must stop pretending that the things we see around us are normal. Heterodox ideas abound even within Catholic circles, for let's be honest, there is nothing good about playing God with having children, whether that be your ideal number or the perfect time to conceive. No matter how you spin it, there is nothing natural about Catholic birth control.
Okay. So he used the word here, heterodox. Now that is a technical term in theology, which means false orthodoxy, heresy to be short. What he has just articulated is not Catholic teaching. And so he's going against Orthodox Catholic teaching that has been fairly consistent since the 1930s. And that is that Catholic couples certainly can and should exercise responsible parenthood, which means that they should decide what would be the number of children to have, the spacing between them, so on and so forth. The debates within Catholicism then are, and how do you achieve that? How do you practice birth control? But to leave it up to God, as he's just articulated, that is not the Catholic position. The Catholic position is that Catholics, in realizing the number of children they're going to have, the spacing and everything else, they should use what is usually called natural family planning or the rhythm method. He has just gone here and undercut that as being against the sovereignty of God. And so he's marked out a position that is it is so conservative that it literally has taken him outside the boundaries of the Catholic Church. So that is, he's voiced a heterodox position.
Okay, more wisdom. There we go.
It's only in the past few years that I have grown in courage to speak more boldly and directly, because as I mentioned earlier, I have leaned into my vocation as a husband and father, and as a man.
One thing I just want to acknowledge here, and again, friends, I know I see you in the comments here, kind of commenting on what he said. Me and April covered more of the cultural aspect of this in a previous episode, so you can go back. But one thing that's worth reiterating is that we can't minimize the fact that Harrison is a multimillionaire. He makes a lot of money, and there's a certain level of privilege that automatically gives you when it comes to being able to say, yeah, don't worry about how many kids you have, because he can take care of all of them financially. There's no stress there. His wife can stay at home because, again, he makes a lot of money. So I think that's a very important piece that I think, and I've been guilty of this in my life, and I try and be aware of it more than ever, that I think Harrison completely overlooks that somehow what he's prescribing should be mapped onto everyone else, especially his Catholic family, so to speak. And I think that's just an important part to kind of call out.
To the gentleman here today, part of what plagues our society is this lie that has been told to you that men are not necessary in the home or in our communities. As men, we set the tone of the culture. And when that is absent, disorder, dysfunction, and chaos set in. This absence of men in the home is what plays a large role in the violence we see all around the nation. Other countries do not have nearly the same absentee father rates as we find here in the US, and a correlation could be made in their drastically lower violence rates as well. Be unapologetic in your masculinity, fighting against the cultural emasculation of men. Do hard things. Never settle for what is easy. You might have a talent that you don't necessarily enjoy, but if it glorifies God, maybe you should lean into that over something that you might think suits you better. I speak from experience as an introvert who now finds myself as an amateur public speaker and an entrepreneur, something I never thought I'd be when I received my industrial engineering degree.
I just want to mention two quick things here. Number one, I think that everyone watching this and listening would agree that obviously we don't want kids growing up without their dad around. I mean, especially if the absentee father notion. I think that there's widespread agreement, obviously, as long as we're not talking about an abusive father. For sure. This notion, though, that like society is pushing out men or masculinity, again, to me in the world I occupy, that just is very coded for like this alpha male masculinity. Everything is toxic. I'm under attack because whatever it might be. And, it's interesting. I do want to hold space for the reality that right now in America, at least, there is a major crisis of men unaliving themselves. Like there is something happening. And so I don't want to minimize that. I'm also a man, so I empathize with that. But I think that this rhetoric from Harrison about, we're called to set the tone of culture, I think he kind of shows his hand about the kind of society he would want to form with other people who share his views, where men like him are really at the top and in charge, and everyone else is kind of underneath of them, setting the tone that they have to follow. And that to me seems like part of the problem that has led to the crisis in masculinity and crisis in fatherhood and in manly and being a man, instead of actually trying to solve it.
Amen.
Just my thought on that. All right, we'll keep going.
The road ahead is bright. Things are changing, society is shifting, and people, young and old, are embracing tradition. Not only has it been my vocation that has helped me and those closest to me, but not surprising to many of you, should be my outspoken embrace of the traditional Latin Mass.
There it is.
I've been very vocal in my love and devotion to the TLM and its necessity for our lives. But what I think gets misunderstood is that people who attend the TLM do so out of pride or preference. I can speak to my own experience, but for most people I have come across within these communities, this simply is not true. I do not attend the TLM because I think I am better than others, or for the smells and bells, or even for the love of Latin. I attend the TLM because I believe, just as the God of the Old Testament was pretty particular in how he wanted to be worshiped, the same holds true for us today. It is through the TLM that I encountered order and began to pursue it in my own life. Aside from the TLM itself.
Yes, please.
I would just note here, what he is in fact doing is delegitimizing the Catholic Church Mass from Vatican II. So that the Novus Ordo is not God's plan. And that's a pretty strong position here. So I just lifted up that's what he's de facto doing.
That's important to note. I also need to bring something up so this is interesting. Just maybe this is some inside baseball on my end. So Rick, who's here, he's great. He's actually a journalist. He does work at, with the Baptist News Network. He put in the comment, and I forgot about this, that Harrison Butker recently spoke at, do you know what the Stronger Men's Conference is by any chance? Have you ever heard of this?
No.
Hold on. Well, I gotta show you this. I gotta show you the trailer. This is what we grew up doing. Hold on. Let me see if I can find the actual. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Let me pull this up real quick. So, yeah. All right. Here we go. Give me a second. Hopefully this will work. Okay, can you see this with me? Let me add you in.
I can't.
All right, as long as you can see it. This is what, okay, just watch this preview first.
ready to fight everything, everything. Tell them I'm ready for anything.
Can God trust you to go in the battle, get wounded, and have the mentality and the mindset, I'm still gonna fight?
Ready for anything.
Okay, welcome to evangelicalism. Okay.
Well, that's like Jesus is, if you've got a sword, go out there and mow them down.
Exactly. So this is called the Stronger Men's Conference. It happens every year. It's at one of the biggest evangelical megachurches in America, and that is pretty much the vibe. It's about, tough men. If you get wounded, go back into battle. Harrison Butker spoke there this year. Okay, so this is why I think it's good for both of us to realize that even though Harrison is quite Catholic and this evangelical thing is very evangelical, the culture war issues and the political perspectives actually unites them to the point where someone like Harrison, who would hold to a very Catholic understanding of salvation and all of that, and an evangelical church who would probably think that maybe Catholics aren't really believing the true gospel, say, you know what, let's shake hands and let's have you talk at our big men's conference. So that's a very interesting observation for me. I thought that you should know. That's what's going on in my circles. All right, let's keep going.
Too many of our sacred traditions have been relegated to things of the past, when in my parish, things such as Ember Days, days when we fast and pray for vocations and for our priests, are still adhered to. The TLM is so essential that I would challenge each of you to pick a place to move where it is readily available. A lot of people have complaints about the parish or the community, but we should not sacrifice the Mass for community. I prioritize the TLM even if the parish isn't beautiful, the priest isn't great, or the community isn't amazing. I still go to the TLM because I believe the holy sacrifice of the Mass is more important than anything else. I say this knowing full well that when each of you rekindle your knowledge and adherence to many of the Church's greatest traditions, you will see how much more colorful and alive your life can and should be. As you move on from this place and enter into the world, know that you will face many challenges. Sadly, I'm sure many of you know of the countless stories of good and active members of this community who, after graduation and moving away from the Benedictine bubble, have ended up moving in with their boyfriend or girlfriend prior to marriage. Some even leave the church and abandon God. It is always heartbreaking to hear these stories, and there's a desire to know what happened and what went wrong.
Can I ask you one follow-up question to the TLM talk that he just gave? And maybe I missed this and you already said it, so forgive me if you did. What is it again that for Harrison about the TLM, the traditional Latin Mass, that makes it for him so much more authentically Catholic? Is it a certain format? Is it just that it's spoken in Latin? Is it a different Mass? I don't. Can you expand a little bit on that?
Well, sure. So the TLM, Traditional Latin Mass, refers to what is usually called the Tridentine Mass. Okay. So Tridentine is a word that comes back from the Italian city of Trent, which is sort of in northern Italy in the Dolomites. And from 1545 to 1563, over a number of sessions, that was a church council that was meant to deal with the challenges of the Protestant Reformation. Out of that Council of Trent, Pius V said, "Okay, here's the Mass, and everyone has to follow this Mass," because up until that time there were different versions of the Mass. So he universalized the Mass, and he said, "And this should never change." So he said that in 1570 or so. And so the fact that he said that, the people in the TLM movement say that therefore the Vatican II changes to the liturgy are illegitimate because they changed the Mass that Pius V in 1570 said you can't change. And so they're saying this is the only valid mass. And that is the position of Archbishop Lefebvre and the St. Pius X Society. And so your earlier person who said, I think he's SSPX, I think he's right, because this is the vocabulary, this is the code of that group.
Yeah, in fact, as you were saying this, Kevin was the person we were talking to earlier, said the same exact thing and said, Father Jim beat me to it. So absolutely, that's great. No, that is, again, that's so helpful for me to have context here and for the audience. So thank you so much. All right, friends, we got about 2.5 minutes left of this speech, and hopefully by now you at least have a small peek behind the curtain of just the deeper subcultures and context and things going on in this speech that are very interesting and hopefully helpful for you.
What you must remember is that life is about doing the small things well, setting yourself up for success, and surrounding yourself with people who continually push you to be the best version of you. I say this all the time, that iron sharpens iron. It's a great reminder that those closest to us should be making us better. If you are dating someone who doesn't even share your faith, how do you expect that person to help you become a saint? If your friend group is filled with people who only think about what you're doing next weekend and are not willing to have those difficult conversations, how can they help sharpen you? As you prepare to enter into the workforce, it is extremely important that you actually think about the places you are moving to. Who is the bishop? What kind of parishes are there? Do they offer the TLM and have priests who embrace their priestly vocation? Cost of living must not be the only arbiter of your choices. For a life without God
nice
is not a life at all, and the cost of salvation is worth more than any career. I'm excited for the future, and I pray that something I have said will resonate as you move on to the next chapter of your life. Never be afraid to profess the one holy, Catholic, and Apostolic Church, for this is the church that Jesus Christ established, through which we receive sanctifying grace.
Okay,
I know that.
Can I just would point out here, I don't think he realizes it. But when we talk about the one holy Catholic Apostolic Church, those are the marks of the church from the Apostles' Creed, and Catholic of those four doesn't mean Roman Catholic. It's small, it's lowercase c, and if you look in a dictionary under lowercase c, Catholic means universal. So he said, what are the marks of the church? That it's one, that it's holy, that it's universal, and that it's apostolic. It doesn't mean that it's Roman Catholic, but I don't think he understands that. He probably thinks it means Roman Catholic, but it's not. So in Protestant churches, if you profess the Apostles' Creed, you are professing one holy Catholic and apostolic, just like we do in Catholic churches.
That's very helpful. Okay, that's good. All right, final minute here. Here we go.
My message today had a little less fluff than is expected for these speeches, but I believe that this audience and this venue is the best place to speak openly and honestly about who we are and where we all want to go, which is heaven. I thank God for Benedictine College and for the example it provides to the world. I thank God for men like President Minnis who are doing their part for the kingdom. Come to find out, you can have an authentically Catholic college and a thriving football program.
All right, he pretty much wraps up there, and they all applaud. Okay, so that's the whole speech. I just have kind of one follow-up question for you. And again, friends, thank you so much for tuning in. And Father Jim, thank you for sharing your wisdom with us and your knowledge, and also giving us your time. I know these lives can be they're emotionally taxing. You got to sit and talk, and it's a lot. One of my final questions is, right now in the Protestant evangelical world, there is this thing, Christian nationalism. I talked about it a lot. And the concern isn't so much that people have these views. I mean, Harrison is entitled to have whatever views he wants. I'm not super concerned about it. My concern is when people like Christian nationalists, for example, want to then make other people assimilate into these views, right? So, okay, what do we outlaw? What do we allow? That kind of stuff. In the Catholic teaching, in the world of Catholicism, how do like would someone like Harrison, let's say Harrison was like, listen, as a Catholic, a good Catholic, we need to outlaw IVF, right? In Catholic teaching, would be like, yes, that is the Catholic teaching on this. Like, we don't agree with it, and therefore it must be outlawed. Or is it more of like, well, we obviously realize we live in a pluralistic society. There's room for nuance here. How does that work in the Catholic world? Because in the Protestant world, it's very much debated, highly debated. And I'm kind of curious in Catholicism if it's the same thing or if it's a little more settled already.
Well, up until Vatican II, the mainstream position would be founded on the principle error has no rights. So you do not have a human right to promote error. And then the second point would be, okay, so that would be like in a syllogism, the major premise, error has no rights. Minor premise, the Roman Catholic Church is the one true church. And then the conclusion is, therefore, in a rightly constituted society, only the Catholic Church should be allowed. That was the prevailing abstract view until the Second Vatican Council. And he mispronounces, but he refers to Saint Jose Maria Escrivá. He said Escriva, who was the founder of the Spanish order Opus Dei, closely allied with Ferdinand Franco, I think. Anyway, the fascist dictator of Spain until his death in 1975. And that was the position of Franco's Spain, is that only the Catholic Church had legitimacy in Spain. In the United States, the view, because we were a pluralistic nation, was that we should certainly tolerate other religions and try to live peacefully, working together for the common good. And a Jesuit by the name of John Courtney Murray was speaking on that and writing on that in the 40s and the 50s. He was silenced by Rome, but he was taken to Rome by Cardinal Spellman as an expert for the Second Vatican Council, and he was foundational in creating the draft of the document called Dignitatis Humanae, on the Declaration of Religious Liberty. And that document changed church teaching in this way. It said the key is not error has no rights, but that human individuals have an inherent right to seek God and worship God as they believe would be best. And so that really changed things, so that Harrison's view here would not be, his view would be orthodox in 1940, but in 2024, it is no longer an orthodox view. It has been repudiated and developed by the Second Vatican Council.
That's really helpful. And to be clear, and I told you this ahead of time, the goal of this, of course, is not to bash Catholicism as a whole. Certainly, any tradition has so much beauty in it. And frankly, I'm only curious to learn more about Catholicism and how it all functions. And I have so many questions. And maybe one day we'll get you back on for a proper interview where I can kind of ask you community questions about Catholicism for dummies, people like me, But at the same time, in our current cultural moment, I'm seeing similar language in different circles, and I know in the evangelical sense that there are people out there. I mean, for example, Doug Wilson, who we talk about often, he's pretty well established and pretty powerful. He was most recently interviewed by Tucker Carlson, to give you an idea. He says it very plainly. In his lifetime, he wants to see Christ is Lord added to our Constitution. And I'm like, okay, this to me is a little too intense. It's way too borderline fascist for me. And so when we see that kind of stuff, I'm always curious. When I hear people like Harrison talk, are they talking about are they trying to reform the Catholic Church according to their more traditional views, so to speak, or is this more of a societal thing? And then if so, what's kind of like the more mainstream position compared to his? Because even in Protestant thinking, most Protestants out there that are not white evangelicals tend to be much more open to pluralism. They want a democracy where other people can function, even if there's theological disagreements. Like, we understand that. But in this more white evangelical fundamentalist space, it is very much a take over and rule from the top down. One of the most common terms is called the Seven Mountain Mandate. I'm not sure if you're familiar with that, but it's very much it came out of the New Apostolic Pentecostal tradition, essentially. And there are people who really believe that God has given them an obligation to take over the 7 spheres of influence to reinvent America to be godly again. And so I think it's important for us to realize that fundamentalism can exist anywhere, and that it's always good to work together to expose that while preserving the beautiful parts of our faith tradition.
Amen.
I love that. Father, I really appreciate you making time. I know I've said it several times, but I mean it. You didn't know me at all. I got your email from a friend. We hopped on a call and said, let's just swing the bat. And this has truly been a wonderful live. A couple of folks asked me if you know of any good resources for them to explore Catholic teaching on a very maybe beginner level. Any books or people or podcasts you recommend for folks to start listening to or reading?
Well, I think accessibility would be the key. Now, I am a Jesuit. I'm going to lift up the name of one of my fellow Jesuits, James Martin, and he has a lot of books that are kind of trying to introduce Christian spirituality to a broader market. So he's got the one, the Jesuit Guide to Almost Anything. That might be one that you can get at. He himself grew up in corporate America. I think he also was an accountant, worked for GE, and as a young executive, he decided, like Harrison, in a certain sense, he felt God was calling him to something else. And so his spiritual autobiography is called In Good Company, and it's a play on words, GE being a company, the Jesuits being a company, something like that. Another one of his that I think is good in terms of tradition is My Life with the Saints. So those are 3 books from Jim Martin. And if I could do a shout out for another Jesuit author,
Please.
I would suggest Father Greg Boyle, who's a couple of years younger than I am. He spent his entire life as a priest working with the gangs in East Los Angeles, and he's
Is that Homeboy Industries?
Yes, he's the founder of Homeboy Industries.
Okay, I've heard of him before. I love that.
And his big insight is this: we are made in the image of God, and that cannot be obliterated.
Yeah.
And so even when someone takes a lot of wrong turns or what have you, that image of God is still there. And what Greg does in his ministry is he tries to hold that up to the people and say, look at, here you are. This is who you really are. So his 3 books that he's got out are Tattoos on the Heart, Barking to the Choir, and The Whole Language, which is, and you can start with any one of them. And what they are reflections on anecdotes of his life with these former gangbangers. And I think you learn a lot about Christianity from him and how to deal with it.
I love that. We're all about exploring the Christian tradition beyond what I call is the basement of evangelical fundamentalism. So any way to explore rooms that are not our own and to learn from them is always a win for me. I might even reach out to you again to get you and some of these folks on the podcast to have a great discussion about this. There's so much more to explore. Father Jim, thank you for your time. It means the world. We'll definitely do something like this again. I really appreciate it.
I've enjoyed it very much. Thank you.
Likewise. All right, friends, there you go. Boom. Wow. That was, in my head, I was just like, keep taking notes. That was awesome. And all the comments on reading live have been amazing. If you're listening to this on podcast, hopefully you enjoyed it. Friends, thank you so much for supporting the work that we do. If you like this live or like the podcast, please make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel and our podcast. Give this video a like if you're watching right now. And if you want to support the work that we do, we're able to do all of this completely paywall free because we're a nonprofit organization, which means we are sustained off of donations, off of the generosity of people like you. This is not a church. You're not giving to God. For all my evangelical friends, this is not a tithe. It's simply an ask to support an organization whose work you believe in. You can click on the link in our show notes. All donations made in the U.S. are tax deductible. We'll do this again soon. I got some more cooking. We'll do a live again soon. Oh, I'll see you guys Friday night. We're going live with Fundy Fridays. That's going to be a lot of fun. So I'll see you back on YouTube, 8 o'clock Eastern on Friday. See ya. Now, how do I end this thing? There we go.